I am NetMoverSitan. Welcome to part 4 of the Urban Plague Law Breakdown. And this will get a bit crazy. Just not in the same way for what is covered in this. Next we have the Kurokumo Clan. They were last seen when they were picking up the nouveau fabric from the carnival before they headed into the library, as per the prescripts given to them by Jan, the messenger of the Index. This Yakuza-esque syndicate is a subsidiary of the Thumb, one of the Fingers, and they can be quite brutal in their methods. Unlike the Stray Dogs, however, another syndicate affiliated with the Thumb, their tattoos are likely something that signifies that they're criminals. At least as far as I'm aware, of course. Although they certainly have some skill with their blades. They don't kill those that are unable or unwilling to pay their protection fees. But they have been known to simply cause some permanent damage and take what has any value from them that they have left. Their loyalty to the Thumb is absolute. And they understand that those that attack them also attack the Thumb. They also have a hatred for those that live in the nest, due to those in the nest watching their suffering for simple amusement, and who can blame them? At least in that regard. But it's only a matter of time before the rolls downhill enough for it to gather mass and roll towards them at the same size and speed as the boulder at the start of Indiana Jones' Raider of the Lost Ark, and bury them in it. As for those that are a part of this syndicate, first we have Sane. She's clearly the one in charge of this group of the Kurokumo Clan, with the other two under her. Clearly even the Japanese in that society got with the times, as in our world, they're not known for being politically correct in a number of areas. But that's not just based on entertainment, never mind anything else. Don't let her revealing attire fool you. Her off, and you'll be lucky to just get maimed. Living in the back streets, she's developed a hatred for those that live in the nests, resentful that they were safe, while those in the back streets were left to fend for themselves. She understands that the fingers, or the hand, are one of the main reasons why not even the wings would try to clean up the back streets. Each of the fingers divides the back streets between each other, managing their territories. The fingers maintain an uneasy relationship with each other. Sometimes they remain peaceful, other times they fight each other, such as whenever there's a territorial dispute. One time that they try to avoid trouble is when there's a finger bow bell, a conference where those higher up in the fingers hierarchy discuss how to control the backstreets more efficiently. Largely because it would cause problems during the meeting if some subsidiary of theirs was causing trouble for them during this. I mean, even organized crime needs to maintain some level of decency. Next we have Yang. He's one of the younger of Seo's enforcers, where if someone higher up orders him to do something, he'll do it without question. That's the way of the Thumb and those affiliated with them. Flowey in Undertale would understand how Yang would see the backstreets at night, where it's kill or be killed, where you're either the predator or the prey. Even though it can be a savage city, some parts at least try to make it look like it has a benign appearance. Pierre's Bistro being one example. It might look like a nice-looking restaurant, but looks were certainly deceiving with that, weren't they? In fact, even a hamburger with nice-looking packaging can hide a disgusting truth. Those of you who have watched the movie Demolition Man will understand what I mean. And this is just during daylight hours. At night, it's so brutal that nothing will be able to hide the horror of it. Where anything goes, where you can do anything that you want and it's not considered a problem. Or rather, who's to hold you to account? Think of anything that could happen in the back streets, and it's pretty much guaranteed to happen there. And it's probably one of the milder examples. The people that live there, they do so because they're not valuable enough to live in the nest, and too valuable to just be thrown into the outskirts. Next we have Gin, one of the Kurokumo Clan's older enforcers. But don't confuse that for weakness, as he maintains a high standard with his ability to wield a katana, and is a force to be reckoned with to any that might provoke him. Yes, he's lost an eye, but he has enough money to afford a cybernetic replacement. He's always ready to commit whatever acts of violence that those above him would order him to do. He understands the weakness that a nest without a wing possesses. One that has fallen with no protectors. An environment similar to the backstreets, where they're unprepared for the deaths and violence that they were previously shielded from. They have the following options: die, hire a fixer, pay protection fees to one of the more powerful syndicates, or in rare cases, move to another wing. Now, the problem with the third option is that the fees are extortionately expensive. Even when a stronger syndicate takes over, it's just replacing one that they pay off with another. All this does is postpone the inevitable, and once they run out of money, the thugs of the syndicate are merciful. Well, that's how they see themselves. Well, if they are merciful, they'll just kill them and get it over with. If they're not, they'll kick them out in a brutal way. Finally, let's talk about the generic thugs of the Kurokumo Clan. They've had their fair share of fights, taking down weaker syndicates, such as the Kingfishers, not caring about them being weakened by fighting the Constellars and being hunted by the Knots, especially if they invade Kurokumo Clan territory, and considering that they cooperated with fixers from the clan office. Yeah, that's selling out. Their part in this story continues in an apartment in Elcorb's Nest. A bad place to be considering the collapse of Lobotomy Corporation. The residents of it were being confronted by three nasty people with katanas. Seo, Yang, and Gin. Seo wasn't happy that the residents of that apartment were unable to pay them for protection. It's clear that this is a protection racket, where you pay organized crime to protect you from their violent brutality, selling a solution to a problem that they created. Seo blamed them, as if they're out of money, they shouldn't have asked for more protection from them. And it was then that these residents made pleas that the fog hid danger and they'd be killed by what's hiding within it. Do they not know who they're dealing with? Expecting mercy from them is like expecting there to be a charitable organization inside the backstreets. The residents even said that it wasn't safe inside either, as thugs could break in at any moment. What? Like the ones that you're begging for mercy from? Yang had to point it out to them. The security of Nest life was gone. It's no longer safe there. Things had changed and they hadn't realized it yet. And they're the biggest income household in that apartment block. Yang's expectations were apparently higher than they actually were. Gin then asked if he should cut one off. Yeah, they might be syndicate thugs, but they can't just commit GBH whenever they want. That's up to those with the authority to make that decision, at least in this scenario. Seo told him to do so, to give them a hard lesson regarding the rules of the backstreets, which they'll need to learn quite soon. But that's considered a free lesson. They beg the enforcers for mercy as she threatened them with the loss of an arm for each of them, struggling to believe that they could be so heartless. Seriously? There are some preschool shows that have more complicated mindsets than these two. Seo was not sympathetic, as if they didn't show mercy when they watched their suffering for their amusement. Why should she and the others show them any? For that, she ordered Yang to take an eye from each of them, as well as an arm. As for how this started, according to one of the residents, they came into their house and threatened them to pay protection money. I rest my case. It was done through coercion. You see, the smart person would understand that they should leave while they could, as at least they'd have a chance to get out of there with their lives and possibly find employment within another wing. These two clearly weren't that smart, assuming that they did work for Elcorb at one point. Yang rationalized that by saying that keeping them safe, killing those that tried to get into their apartment block, well, this was largely because they didn't want anyone brutalizing their clients but them if they didn't pay up. One of the residents was tearful, unsure of how they're supposed to live now that they have nothing after the nest fell. Gin didn't care about the crybabies, considering themselves generous by backstreet business standards. Yeah, organized crime calling its operations business. It's as if they see themselves as the heroes in this story. As if that makes what they do legitimate. As for the lesson that Seo was giving, if you receive something, you should return the favor accordingly. Well, it was more a choice of pay them the money or receive a messy death, if they're feeling particularly generous. She even spoke of the ring. Imagine if they were protecting that area. Apparently it's too disturbing for even them to speak of. Now, if a syndicate is hesitant to even speak of the details of what the ring, another of the fingers, does, after they've mutilated someone that can't pay them, you know they're bad. I'm guessing that involves long drawn-out deaths, displaying their ritualistically mutilated corpses in the open to send a warning to others, or maybe some kind of twisted voodoo cult. Who knows, but it doesn't sound good, whatever the case. She warned them to leave the house by tomorrow, telling Gin to confiscate the deed of the apartment from them. Yang told them that if they were still there, people much less pleasant than they were would come for them, and would likely finish the job. After they were outside the apartment, Seo told her enforcers that it was time to pay their due credit after collecting protection money and got the fabric from the carnival earlier. As for the situation with Elcorp's nest, there was a turf war over it between the thumb and the index. It had been some time since that had happened, as if it was the promised estates. They've also clashed with the Rusted Chains, a syndicate that's big on cutting themselves with the chains that, well, cut into them, as they fight the... They've also clashed with the Blade lineage, a syndicate that only takes in those with scars on their bodies, where if you have an unscarred body, you're considered a coward, only worthy of lethal sword practice. Then one of Seo's henchers was knocked down by a woman with a canine head. She was interested in what the Kurokumo Clan had. Seo thought that she had some fashionable surgery on her. Yang, on the other hand, was more familiar with her. She was Tanya, the one known as the Hare de Loup, or the Wolf's Hour. Sorry if I butchered the pronunciation. Seo continued to insult her. She found this amusing. She observed that there was 100 Kurokumo there, and Gin considered it ridiculous that she believed that she could take them on, which she genuinely believed. Seo decided to humour this apparent upstart. Unfortunately for the Kurokumo clan, Tanya wiped the floor with them. She believed that she could have crushed them before she became what she was. She killed most of them, but Seo, Yang, and Jin, and a few of the henchers were still alive. Well, they were still able to kneel. As for what Tanya wants, besides a ton of cash living in her nest, well, before that, she wants to make music. When a hencher rather stupidly told her to shut up, she cut their head off, and took pleasure from that. She wanted the nouveau fabric that they were carrying, as her boss wanted it to suit up for their performance, not afraid of making an enemy of the thumb, and considering that she overpowered 100 Kurokumo, killing most of them. I'd be surprised if she was. She clearly relished the idea of taking them on. She also wanted those goons to go to the library, giving them an invitation to make that possible, where it's confirmed to be at the center of the nest of District 12, which was where they were. It's not about material wealth for her, at least not right now. It's about the music first. Her orchestrator wanted to get rid of the syndicates in order to make that music, and she threatened to remove their bones from their flesh if they didn't use the invitation at that point. Seo complied, realizing that she doesn't really have much of a choice, clearly afraid of Tanya, who also added that they'd all be dead if they came back without the books. Angela considered that to be intense. Roland observed that the Fingers were fighting over the ownership of the nest of District 12. I doubt that Roland would be unable to figure that out by now. He then explains how it works. When a wing is broken, the nest collapses and becomes similar to the back streets, where there's no one to protect them against the lawless, the syndicates that have less than benevolent intentions, even compared to the wing that had fallen. At least until a new wing rises and gets assigned that nest, where they either buy the land from the syndicates, or they hire fixers or other syndicates to kick them out forcefully. Those people still there during this? They're on their own. They can hire a fixer, get evicted to the back streets, or try to join another wing, as where they live is no longer safe. Those that don't take what they can get, they've had it. That's standard procedure in the city. Angela recognized Tanya as a case of the distortion. This one was different, one that could maintain some degree of control over herself, even considering her to be more rational than Roland. Angela, he doesn't make casual threats to give those that he's met a violent death or cut off their heads for just insulting him. Certainly not within the library. I mean, this is outside of receptions. Because during receptions, that's defending his life. Upon arrival, Yang lamented at how things had gone. Seo was angered by Tanya, still seeing her as inferior, despite the fact that she made short work of her underlings. Gin tried to calm her, saying that they'd report that to the Thumb after taking care of what Tanya wanted from them. This worked somewhat, although Yang found Tanya's disrespect ridiculous, due to them being a Thumb subsidiary. Seo found the books on offer to be tempting, and Yang noted that the carnival ended up turning into books themselves. There was also a book relating to the nest of Elcor. At this point, Angela appeared to greet them. Seo wanted to know how she collected the books that they needed the most. Angela stated that it was the role of the library, where those that fail to beat the librarians become a part of it. I can imagine that your book would probably be written in Japanese, considering the overall theme of your syndicates. Full of anger, a broken moral compass, and lots of profanity. Well, got any better ideas? Gin could smell the blood in the place. Being a seasoned combatant, Angela said the same of them. Well, they had dismembered a couple of nest residents before coming there, so that's understandable. That, and they got beaten up by a distortion. Yang suggested that they head to the bathhouse for a warm one after that. Yeah, that's something that's known to exist in both Japan and Korea. So, agreed, as they needed to blow off some steam, as they had a particularly bad day. Gin even offered to pay for their drinks. That's assuming that there are any bars, pubs, whatever you want to call them, in Elkor's Nest. And this mildly annoyed Angela. So then decided that they should head inside. All those within. Let's just say they didn't need to worry about Tanya's retribution. After this, Roland suspected that more guests would try to take over Elkor's Nest. They have the thumb, the index, and this third party that Tanya is apparently a part of. It wasn't a syndicate in the conventional sense, considering that she had no fear of reprisals from the fingers. Angela sees that even smaller syndicates want to involve themselves in this turf war. Roland understood that what the ones on top have will be eyed enviously by those below them. For now, the thumb and the index won't take action, but that doesn't mean that those immediately below them won't. While attracting attention from them will add to the library, it could be risky if things escalate too quickly, especially if the other fingers get involved. Angela didn't really care about that. All she really did care about was if the results benefited them. Next we have the Musicians of Bremen, an animal-themed syndicate consisting of people who have gone completely mad from the pianist's performance, wishing to recreate its performance by making instruments from human body parts, while wearing their animal masks. I can understand them with that last part. But I honestly can't imagine musical instruments made from human body parts would go down well, even in the most depraved of backstreets. Never mind a nest. Besides, it's not just the physical object that made the pianist's performance what it was. It was the power that he had as well. While those that were too close to him were drawn into his instruments and killed, those that were far enough away survived but were driven insane. Think of it as similar to the effects of the bomb of Hiroshima, as in the bomb that was dropped. Those within a certain radius, close to the flashpoints, the epicenter, they were outright killed, while those far enough away were at least killed slower due to radiation burns, or survived, but had some permanent scarring. I mean, if you can think of a better way of putting it, please put it in the comments. The syndicate's original founders were Hee-haw, Doodle-doo, Woof, and Meow, while Moo and Oink joined the syndicate later on. Hee-haw, Doodle-doo, and Woof would go on to leave the Musicians of Bremen to join with a mysterious individual The others would remain. First, we have the current leader of the Musicians of Bremen, who is, Meow? Sorry, couldn't help myself. This crazy cat lady that doesn't have a cat fetish that would rival the Tim Burton version of Catwoman is one of the founding members of the Musicians of Bremen that is actually still with them, armed with a pink baton that makes a noise that implies that it generates either heat or electricity to amplify the physical blow. I mean, it might sound like a lightsaber, but that kind of technology hasn't been found, at least not by this point in the story. I say crazy as she delights in describing all those that the musicians assimilated by the pianist's instrument and how close she was to being among them, excited and lost in the recollection. Although she wasn't delusional to the point that she believes that they're on the same level as the pianist, as, well, they're not. But they believe that their music is unique and their performance is fantastic. Yeah, for those that you don't brutally murder to make the instruments. Still think they're not crazy? What's wrong with you? And this is me we're talking about. Okay, what's next? Oh, yes, that. Next we have Oink. Now, this axe-wielding madman is unique among the Musicians of Bremen as he has a professional history. He was originally with Seven Association. That's a fixer association that deals with investigation and intelligence. Knowledge isn't just power, it's actual currency, such as knowing the infamy of a syndicate, fixer offices starting up and closing, the distortion. Basically, if it's anything but the secrets of the singularities, odds are that they know something about it. And they usually deal with the She and Lu associations. The She association, we know, are an association of assassins, but the Lu association, I'll cover them when we get to that part of the law. Oink was in Section 3, so pretty high up. The Seven Association fixers could hold their own in combat. They'd need to be if they have info that some factions would brutally kill a family member in a painful and humiliating way in order to get it. They favour simple bladed weapons rather than crude workshop weapons. Weapons that they use with pinpoint precision. This wasn't enough to protect him from the performance of the pianist. He was close enough to be driven insane by his music. And he left that association sometime after and joined the Musicians of Bremen. He's anxious, and despite practicing hard, he wasn't that successful. To be honest, I doubt that'd make a lot of difference, considering what is known so far. Finally, we have Mumu. This one wears a bunny mask. Hail the rabbit! And wields a conductor's baton made from a bone, likely from one of his victims, with part of it made into a sharp point. He's an arrogant man that joined the Musicians of Bremen to recreate his music. The music of the pianist on the day that he attacked District 9. A resident of the back streets that understands the fear that everyone within it has. And while the shops within them aren't as good as those in the nest, they have what they need. And based on his home district being the Street of Flavor... Oh. Me. He's from District 23, isn't he? The meat pies? We can guess what meat is in that. And how do they make the spaghetti made from the special pasta? Actually, no. I don't think we want to know. According to him, they even delivered the leftovers to restaurants in that district, such as Pierre's Bistro. Apparently, it's to prevent it from going to waste. Although they stopped since Oink made mistakes that ruined the ingredients. Yeah, they're more cannibals. As they sometimes got tasty meals, rather, for free when they delivered what they delivered. I am so sorry that if you've vomited at how disgusting this is, but this is actually the law. South Korea definitely knows its grimdark. As for where they factor into the story, well, somewhere in the back streets. The Musicians of Bremen had finished that day's performance, and it didn't go well. At least, not according to Meow. Moo told Oink to keep the beats. They were apparently in District 9, the home of the pianist, who appeared to have become some kind of secular martyr after he was killed. Oink was apparently still bothered by what Hee-Haw said, at least according to Meow, where it might be their last performance ever if they go into the library. Moo told him to shake off his worries with the exciting music. Meow threatened to turn him into an instrument if he half his parts. Yeah, they kill humans to make them into musical instruments. This was supported by Moo. He would, considering where he's from. Meow told them that they couldn't let little thoughts disturb their performance. She understood that the others were new, and that they had problems performing in the early days. She, Doodle-Doo, Woof, and Hee-Haw formed the Musicians of Bremen to recreate the performance of the pianist, telling them to quit gawking and concentrate on the music. Oink left 7 Association Section 3 and joined that band because of that same performance. Yeah, he had it all, and he gave it up to make music like that. Sure that's wise? Moo remembered that day as well. More specifically, what happened that day. Meow then excitedly recalled the grand and majestic piano made from 100,000 people, the sound created from each stroke of the tendons. It made her realize how beautiful sounds humans can make in the hands of the right performer. Meow, this was one of the biggest acts of mass murder that the city had ever had. And you thought it was a good thing? She even mentioned the fixers sent in towards the end of the performance. They also became one with the piano and became the music. It needed a top-level fixer to take care of that distortion. She was also one who watched the performance at the scene of it. She then went on to describe how the fixers were buried in the notes one by one, which made their bodies explode about as much as a fight scene in a 1990s action movie. The fixers became part of the piano. The last of them was taken apart slowly and painfully as red notes scattered from their body. She described the intervention of the Black Silence, who cut off his hands like a judicial process in an Arab country towards a thief, and then cut off his head. Just before Meow became a part of the performance, Mumu sat in his office and listened to it from a distance. Wait, Mumu, you were jealous of Meow? Office? It's unclear if he was saying that as in him being a clerk or if he was another former fixer. Then Oink complained how he's unable to make music like the pianist, no matter how much he smashes the ankle bones, plucks the tendons, and scrapes the flesh from the splint bones. Well, it would help if he had some real instruments, not makeshift ones made from your victims. He was also insecure about what Hee Haw and Doodle Doo said. Upon hearing this, Meow tried to reassure him, telling him not to get impatient. She admits that they still have some way to go before they're at the pianist level. They just need to pour their heart and soul into their performance, and they'll get there eventually. Hee Haw, Woof, and Doodle Doo's performance was considered fantastic. Don't ask for the details, as I don't know them, and it's probably going to be messy. Apparently, they were going on a trip to prepare for the next performance. They won't be returning. This inspired Oink, wanting to perform like them. Meow wanted to discuss that again after that performance was finished and they dealt with Hee Haw's library suicide mission. Job. Apparently there's a performance that's going to be bigger than ever, where new instruments would be found in the library. Meow wants to perform in a supermarket next time. This was due to Oink liking those. Mumu wanted to mess around with all kinds of instruments there. Okay, that just sounds wrong taken out of context. It's like referring to those taken down by Pierre and Jack as ingredients. As for what effect this had on Oink, this encouraged him to practice harder. Then they geared up for the library. After watching this, Roland commented on the nut jobs left in the wake of the pianist. Angela mentioned, "From break and ruin, the most beautiful performance begins." Roland asked if she was interested in listening to the pianist's music. She wasn't. She heard that more times than she liked, and it wasn't from the pianist. She was likely referring to the silent orchestra abnormality. Something similar, but different. As for Roland, it'd be a lot faster to count those that didn't hear his music. It ravaged his whole being. He didn't want to remember that again. And it was clearly a sensitive subject. He considered musicians to be molto vivace in the head, at least in some way, which means very lively in Italian. Well, that's one way of putting it. Very nutty, more like. Angela observed that they seem to love performance that leads to doom. Angela, it's a city full of people driven to self-destructive behaviors. I'd be more surprised to find someone that doesn't engage in such behaviors. I mean, can anyone think of how long a Batman-type vigilante would last in that city? It's certainly full of those trapped in a world that others don't understand, as Roland would put it. The Musicians of Bremen entered the library. Meow goes over their routine, where she says, "Cat goes meow." Then she says, "Pig goes." And the others say, "Oinky oink." Then she says, "Rabbit goes." And Oink awkwardly says, "Wink, wink." Now this annoyed Mumu, and I'm not surprised as Rabbit should go, "Eek." At least he wields the power of the rabbit, so he at least has that right. Then Angela appeared to greet them, only to be interrupted by them not paying attention to her. Because rabbits don't have any signature cry, sounds, or whatever you want to call them, so Oink suggested that they make one. Meow thought that to be a good idea. This annoyed Angela. Meow then wondered if she was going to let them in. Oink then talked down to the stupid little machine and told her not to keep them waiting. Then something happened which surprised them. Meow struck Angela and she leaked blood. This didn't seem right to Oink. Mumu threatened to break her legs if she didn't let them in. What a bunch of holes. They make Roland seem pleasant by comparison. They deserve what was coming to them. After the reception, Roland was surprised by Angela bleeding, which didn't seem right to him, as she was supposed to be a synthetic. It was surprising to Angela as well, as she shouldn't flinch either. Angela was now familiar with pain, as in feeling it. It would appear that she's becoming more human as the library was becoming more complete. There was no need to be worried just yet, although what would happen when the process was complete? in the next part of this lore breakdown series, it'll be the continuation of one individual story. And it's not going to get any better for this one. Until next time. Hail the rabbit!